Should we consider ethics when developing artificial intelligence? Hello, welcome back to the Hello World Show. I'm Heather Downing.
And I'm Spencer Schneidenbach, and we're here at NDC Oslo with Pritchard Campbell. He's a Microsoft Regional Director, a MVP, also a host of .NET Rocks, which is an awesome podcast that I've been listening to for years.
Yes.
Well, we've been doing it a long time. I mean, that started back in 2002, which is before the word podcast even existed.
And let's be real, it's not .NET anymore. It's just
We've never been about .NET. We've been about .NET developers. And .NET developers need to know a fairly diverse set of things, more so than ever before. It may have been easier back in the early aughts, when Carl started the show, and I came on board as the co-host in 2005. That's version 2. Things were pretty straight ahead. We were just trying to be what we wanted to be. But as the world changed, as the client diversified, and as the cloud became real, there's a bigger and bigger skill set. It's needed to be a productive .NET developer.
Richard, what are you going to teach us today?
I've been doing talks, keynotes and things like that about leadership and careers and so forth. And I tend to end with this one particular piece, which is talking about the impact that artificial intelligence technologies are going to have on us sociologically, and our responsibility as technologists to make sure it goes in the right direction.
No, we totally agree. So tell us more about it.
So I lead off with this idea that AI is coming, but it's kind of a dumb term. The problem with the term artificial intelligence is as soon as it works, they give it a new name. Right? So there is artificial intelligence is the catch-all for all the technology that doesn't work. Right? When it was playing chess, as soon as it was able to play chess well, they called it Deep Blue. When they figured out how to play Go, they called it AlphaGo. And when they figured out how to make it actually speak and understand language, then it became Siri or Cortana. Like, it gets another name. Artificial intelligence is just tech that doesn't work. But there's a set of techs that are coming now, and we saw a bunch of this at Build. So Build is where we saw that crazy construction site with the cameras everywhere that was tracking all the people and was tracking all the heavy equipment. And it could answer some interesting questions because it was able to identify objects and people. You could say, well, I'm looking for the hot saw, or I'm looking for a jackhammer, and it would know what room it was in, and so it could sort of provide you with information. It also was presenting safety features. So there's an example of where a forklift clips a barrel of chemicals and causes a spill.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then, the system is able to say, well, I know what's in that container. I know who's the best people to clean it up. I can notify everyone to keep it away. And as you watch that process, and I think Microsoft was coming up with some of the best examples you possibly could. I found myself vacillating between being really excited about the technology and being utterly horrified at the potential dystopia around it. It is kind of frightening. And it occurred to me that the same way that robotics has an uncanny valley, we can see an uncanny valley in AI technology too. So I don't know if you've heard this term, the uncanny valley. Yeah. As long as robots are cartoonish or just mechanical, we don't have a problem with them. They could even be cute, but as they start to look more and more like people,
or sound like people,
and have certain gestures and so forth, but not quite right, you dip down from acceptable to absolutely unacceptable, like to the sort of horrifying, and it's very visceral. And I don't know that everybody has that reaction around this AI type technology, or maybe it's just us as technologists, because you can immediately see how a camera system like that, ostensibly for safety on a work site, can also be something that is remarkably oppressive. I know how often you take a break. I know how many times you went to the bathroom. I can actually count the number of minutes you supposedly worked, actually had a tool in your hand or anything like that. Certainly I know every time you make a safety violation, because that's one of the things you're looking at there. And so it really could have stressed me out in the terms of, we're going to have to figure this out. We're ultimately going to be responsible for how to make this work. And I equated it to something pretty dramatic, which is the creation of nuclear weapons. So talk about two people, Enrico Fermi, the father of the atomic bomb, and Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb. And there are certain people that look at them from history and say, how could they do such a thing? And in one sense, they say it's sort of inevitable. That was going to happen. And the reason you should be impressed with these two is not the devices they made, but what they did next. Because they stayed in the conversation. They were the most credible people in the world in understanding what that technology could do, and insisted that it be used wisely. And arguably it was, because it basically has never been used. You know, when one could argue that it's kept the world safe, or certainly contained war, let's face it, we're actually living in the safest time in history, irrespective of what any particular television show tells you. And I don't know that we can lay that at the feet of these men, but they were part of that conversation. And so when I'm talking to technologists about these artificial technology concepts, a lot of people are appalled and they turn away from it. And I say, don't turn away. And don't despair that we're going to ruin things here. You have to stay in the conversation. We choose what happens. And if we don't choose, we end up in that dystopic world. Right? And that's even Satya at Build did this 1984 reference. And when I started looking for 1984, I found all these book covers. You know, one would argue that was one of the most important books of the 20th century. And at the same time, by the end of the 20th century, it felt like it almost could be coming true. But we're in the 21st century now. We know we could make it true. We just have to choose not to. So the message has always been, we choose what happens next. We're the technologists, so it's up to us what we do with this technology one way or the other. And it's a moral discussion. Like I ask people in the leadership, it's like when you decide to lead your life, think hard about what kind of choices you're going to make. Because in software, we don't always make good choices. No. And I reference Uber in this. Yeah. You know, the gray ball incident, and if you haven't really looked at this, it's easy to look away. They've done a lot of repugnant things.
Yes.
But from a software perspective, gray ball is extraordinary. I mean, they call it about a violation of terms technology, but any piece of software that hides itself so well on the phone that even when you uninstall the app, it's still there, that anticipates that if it's seeing it, that it's located in Cupertino, it may be an Apple tester, and so it won't do a bunch of its naughty behaviors, that they actually are able to maintain a list of phones that it should hide itself from effectively and change its behavior from. I mean, it's one thing to indict the CEO over that, because in the end, he's the boss, but somebody wrote that code. And that, to me, is the most concerning part. Now, there's good news to this. The good news is that we know about gray ball. And I would hope that the authors of it realized what they had made, much in the same way that Enrico Fermi and Edward Teller realized, and made the world available, visible. Right? That you could see what's going on. And I think it's going to be the same challenge for us as we work on this technology, because it's coming. The next year, the next 18 months, we're all going to get to choose how we work with it. And I hope we can make better choices, because it's important. What our world looks like going forward is going to be directly affected by the choices we make around that technology.
Very true. Ethics in software engineering is really interesting. I'm sure I've probably talked to half a dozen first and second year developers who had the ability to do something illegal because of the access they had to data.
Sure.
And were asked to do so by their companies. And
yes.
To educate yourself, because really at the end of the day, you're going to be the one indicted because you're the one who wrote that code. That is really important, a piece that now we're starting to cross over into these areas even more so, because everything is about the elusive user data. We all want to know everything about our users, and sometimes it can cross lines. And if you're not educating yourself about what is acceptable, sometimes you can be the one that is accidentally does that misstep.
And the physicist of the Manhattan Project and the later research that made the hydrogen bomb, you know, at least they were professionals. They had their degrees. They had an organizing body that allowed them to work more effectively as a collective. And software's never gotten there. For better or worse, a doctorate in computing science, not only just incredibly rare, but not the same thing. You know, if you're a lawyer, you have a bar. If you're a doctor, you have your medical association. We don't have those things. And so it's really up to us that we actually make the right choices here.
Very true. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us. Hope you learned something.
A big shout out to the sponsor of this episode.
Don't forget to share this video on social media.
And comment below to be entered into our weekly giveaway.
Tell us what questions you have for our guests. See you next time.